Welcome, everybody, to Notes on a Japanese Garden. I'd like to welcome you to the Zen and beauty of Japanese gardens. And it took me 3 decades to arrive. And now that I'm here, I'll just never leave. I'm so inspired by their beauty and their meaning. I'll be talking this evening about my very modest efforts to build a Japanese themed garden in my small downtown backyard and the gardens and culture that influenced me. I'd visited Japanese gardens previously, including the one at Kew in London and in San Francisco. And in the fall of 2024, I finally went to Japan. In 3 weeks, I toured 28 gardens. I'll show you some of what I saw as I take you on my journey to build my own Japanese themed garden. I will talk about the elements you might include, the unique Japanese design concepts that I adapted to my needs, and the plants I considered. Japan's gardening tradition has passed from master to pupil for 1,600 years. The record of garden making is likely the oldest text on the topic, dating to the 11th century. The Japanese tradition of garden making is rooted in the natural world of Japan, which is surrounded by water, steep mountains, and deep valleys. This is a unique art based upon the choice and arrangement of natural materials to create a scene that has the power to transform and inspire the viewer and gardener. It offers peace and quiet contemplation with restraint, order, harmony, and decorum. Gardens, as we call them, began in Japan around the 8th century. There are 4 basic types: the dry pebble or rock gardens, pond or stroll gardens, as we see here, smaller courtyard gardens, plus tea gardens. This garden that we're seeing is a masterwork from the 15th century at the Golden Pavilion in Kyoto. The universe is recalled here. Mythological mountains are evoked by the rocks and the islands. The importance of gardens in Japan is partially related to its geography. The 8 islands are 75% mountainous, including 50 active volcanoes, and 15% of the land is sloping. That means that only about 10% of the land is habitable. Most of its 127 million people live in cities and small flats. Many have bonsai or small entranceway or courtyard gardens. Larger gardens are essential and popular places of respite. What drew me initially to Japanese gardening were the dry or Zen gardens like Ziho in Kyoto with its raked pebbles and representational rocks. I love the simple beauty with its limited palette. Everything is carefully chosen and maintained, from the shape of the pruned trees to the placement of the stones. It's a connection or entry point into nature. I long to have one of my own. I'm an amateur in the old sense of the word, of being one who loves or admires. Both apply to how I feel about Japanese gardens. I gain both aesthetic joy and instruction. My hope is to create my own beautiful, peaceful space and attain a degree of self-enlightenment. A caveat to this topic: this is Borges' description of a poem, but it seems apt for a Japanese garden too. A Japanese garden is something that cannot be defined without oversimplifying it. It would be like attempting to define the color yellow, love, the fall of leaves in autumn. There is something mysterious and unknowable about these gardens. They mean different things to different people. It is almost impossible to clearly state what defines a Japanese garden. But to me, this is a positive thing, because beauty that is not explained allows the viewer to remain in a state of wonder. It widens the space for daydreaming, loosens the intellect, and invites reverie and the viewer's imagination. In this lecture, I hope to open you up to embracing the beauty of mystery while imparting what I've learned, which is only a very small aspect of the whole. The modern Japanese term for garden is tien, a compound word composed of the characters for niwa and sono. These encompass the 2 broad types of gardens. Niwa is a sacred place. In ancient Shintoism, Japan's original religion, it was a gravel plot in nature where specific ceremonies were carried out. Eventually, they were included in shrines and temples. Sono is a secular place for entertainment and aesthetic enjoyment. They generally have a pond and are planted with trees, shrubs, and flowers. In the middle of this continuum are gardens combining aesthetic pleasure with philosophical or religious meaning. Many gardens at temples and shrines, for example, have both dry and pond gardens. This is my former backyard garden in Hintonburg, Ottawa. I had tried a few Japanese touches, this dry stream bed for one, but I didn't have the heart or energy to redesign it completely. Then my life changed in 2010. I had remarried, and my husband and I decided to build an infill house in the backyard of our triplex in Centertown. I left my garden of 19 years. I still miss it, but I was ready to move on and try to build a new garden with a bit of Zen in it. There's nothing Zen about this. This is my new yard in the fall of 2011. Construction is not a pretty business, but my partner, Stuart, who is an architect, made it look relatively easy. In this view to the west, you can see the foundation of the patio as well as the entryway to the house. Once the patio was finished, I could contemplate the space. This is the southeast section. It is bordered to the left by the driveway. The yard is flat, but drops some 10 feet behind to the neighbors, held in by a retaining wall. We had to fit a shed in this spot, and I had other plans too. Fittingly, I began where Japanese gardening began 3,000 years ago. This wasn't by design, it was by coincidence. Early gardens, as I explained, were niwa. These were the sacred places in the indigenous Shinto religion. They were austere and simple pebble-covered plots in the forest or along the seashore, created for ceremonies honoring god spirits called kami, which were thought to temporarily reside in nature, mountains, rivers, trees, and stones. Shinto rituals are intended to keep good relations between the spiritual and natural world. Later, these pebbled spaces were placed in front of chiefs' houses. Then they were included at simple shrines. Later still, when Zen Buddhism was introduced from China in the 8th century, dry gardens were adapted in a much more sophisticated form. They were places for seated contemplation and stillness, removed from the stresses of the secular world. The aim was to strengthen spiritual resolve. This close-up of a raked gravel garden is part of one of the oldest landscape gardens in Japan, dating to the 9th century. We'll see more of it later. A monk sips morning tea. It's quiet. The chrysanthemums flowering. From the earliest times, poetry inspired Japanese gardens, and poetry was written in these gardens. Perhaps poetry can help us grasp the mystery of the Japanese garden. Japanese Zen teaches that meditation and daily tasks are the way to spiritual enlightenment. This photo was taken at the Ryojin Temple in Kyoto. These dry landscape or karasensi gardens represent paradise or a state of unity. They typically feature white sand or gravel to metaphorically represent water. Larger stones placed within this expanse of raked gravel represented mountains or land. These gardens were completed with minimal vegetal materials. They aimed to reduce the elements of nature to symbolic representation. This is Japan's most famous Zen garden, built in 1450, but burned several times. This version emerged in 1799. It's 29 feet wide, 78 feet long. The garden is enclosed on 3 sides. On the long side is a boiled clay wall. Over time, oil seeped out to create subdued colors and designs that exemplify what they call wabi-sabi. This is a key concept in Japanese aesthetics. Author Leonard Cohen defines it as the beauty of the imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. The 4th wall is the porch on the abbot's quarters, or hojo. Visitors sitting on the viewing porch can empty their minds to meditate on the simplicity and beauty of the garden. In this space, the viewer is set free of all preconceived notions of what constitutes a garden. They might envision a mountaintops poking above clouds or a rolling sea. It's an abstract work, though some think the various stones represent a tiger carrying her cubs across a river. This Karensinsi garden is in its purest form, almost without plants, except moss at the base of each rock grouping. There are 15 stones in 5 groups, one group of 5, 2 of 3, and 2 with 2 stones. 15 equals completeness, as in the 7 continents and 8 oceans. The garden's 15 stones are arranged so that regardless of where you sit on the viewing porch, there is always one rock that is hidden from view. This is a sign of human imperfection. One mind can never understand everything. Some Japanese ladies told me they saw number 15 peeking out behind a cluster of 5, but I didn't see it. This variation of Karensinsi garden includes clipped azaleas in places one might expect rocks. The Temple of the Silver Pavilion was designed by Soami in 1482 near Kyoto for a shogun or warrior chief. It's remarkable that the designer's name is still recalled. Interestingly, many of the early garden practitioners were women. The villa was converted to a temple after the shogun died, and his grandson vowed to honor his memory by covering parts of it in silver leaf. That never happened, but the name stuck. Karensi Gardens embrace the concept of ma, or the space in between. These spaces between elements, like rocks and trees, are as crucial and meaningful as the elements themselves. Ma allows these elements to breathe, to move and connect with each other and the viewer. This empty space also creates a sense of stillness and quiet, encouraging contemplation and deeper connection with nature. This purposeful arrangement of azaleas and gravel with ample empty space in between is a classic example of Ma. It has been said that emptiness is the richest and most profound material the gardener has to work with. Zihoin Temple was built in 1535, but this garden was created in 1961. I particularly like the rough sea combined with moss representing ancient forests. The pointed stones and the waves give the garden great energy. Zen Karensensi gardens, such as this one, are intended to emulate the rigors of Buddhism. The great expanse of gravel allows you to empty your mind and leave the space for enlightenment to enter. These gardens are intended to strip away the separation of viewer and garden so that one flows into and becomes the other. Raking the gravel is a form of meditation and prayer. Focusing completely on what you are doing makes you aware of the process and is very calming. These gardens are very high maintenance. Every wayward leaf has to be removed, and it is raked daily by monks, but this is part of the Zen process. So, with ample inspiration, I considered my work in progress in the southeast corner of my yard. Stuart had built a 2-door shed. The driveway entrance was for bike storage, the backyard side for gardening gear. The shed set the stage for my Japanese Zen garden to the right. It's a small space, 7 feet wide, 12 feet long, and it's not ideal because the gravel is meant to be raked daily, undisturbed by human footfall, but I needed to enter the shed. So I adapted the ideal to meet the needs of a small inner city garden. For my birthday, I asked Stuart for rocks. He was alarmed, thinking I meant diamonds. Actually, I meant something far more alluring to me, rocks for the garden. Before I began, I considered these aspects which are integral to any Japanese garden. It has to be natural. It has to seem as if the garden grew by itself. Nature is the picture frame into which the garden or man-made work of art is inserted. Asymmetry adds to this impression with the use of rocks and plants in groups of 3, 5, 7, or solitary. Simplicity refers to a limited number of elements and plant types with ma or space in between. Triangles in placement of rocks and plants and pruning of trees also allows for ma. And lines and curves create calm and tension, like the lines in the sand of a dry garden. I first needed to consider how to group my rocks. Groupings of this kind are usually seen in temples. This isn't random. Japanese gardeners have labored for centuries to refine the philosophy behind placing rocks and grouping them. It can take them weeks or months to select and place a group of rocks. There are two basic approaches: a realistic duplication of nature or an aesthetic representation, which uses rocks to symbolize scenes, usually from Buddhism. I chose the depiction of nature. This is the effect I was looking for: 3 rocks in the shape of a scalene triangle when seen from the side. I didn't want too many rocks because it is a small space. I wanted them to look like they naturally belonged in the landscape. The tall rock is central. It represents one of 2 important mountains in the Japanese Buddhist tradition: Mount Fudaraku, home of the goddess of mercy, or Shumusen Mountain at the center of the universe, surrounded by 7 seas, or a cluster of rocks. I was going for the simple one, Mount Fudaraku. I began by positioning rock pieces I had lying around the garden to get the placement and general shape right. Whereas flat stones convey a calm and solid feeling, tall, pointed stones project a strong, active mood. Mount Fudaraku was at the center. The stone to the right at the back was to represent forests on a foothill, and the stone in the forefront, a landmass. Choosing the rocks was difficult. I went to a yard near Manotick that no longer exists. I knew what shapes I was looking for and that the rocks shouldn't have any sharp angles or edges. I also wanted rocks with a similar composition. They needed to look like they belonged together in nature. It took me hours to make my selection. I chose rocks that came from West Carleton, outside of Ottawa. I used to live around there, so that place has importance for me. Typical of the area is mica. I thought the grains of mica might suggest a waterfall down the side of Mount Fudaraku. There's also some pink quartz on the side of the mountain, which I imagined to be a reflection at sunset. I aimed to arrange the rocks so they looked like they belong naturally together. They also needed to look like they were stable and solid, not precariously propped against each other. Rocks had to be dug in so that they appeared to emerge from the ground in their broadest part. This reproduces the archetypal shape of Japanese mountains. And though I knew where I wanted to place them, I had to find the right face of each rock. The principal rock should be set so its face is slightly turned sideways when seen from the front. I put down some geotextile, used an off-white pea gravel. White can produce a blinding glare, and I didn't want that. I knew I wouldn't be raking it into a pattern, though I think now I could, if only around the rocks. Japanese gardens prize conifers, so to the left of the rocks, I planted a Thuja occidental Zimatilik. I love the way the foliage grows. The horizontal lattice behind my rock grouping seemed more Japanese than the usual diagonal. And for now, Virginia creeper and wild grapevines cover it. When it's time to replace it, I think I'll use bamboo. In fact, I'd like that all across my garden. We had made minimal progress on the rest of the yard. A landscape architect friend, Sandra Donaldson, helped. The backyard was a century-old lawn, well trampled with poor soil and almost no organic material. I added triple mix in preparation for planting, then set about deciding what type of Japanese garden I wanted. There are 3 main types of Japanese gardens in the Sono, or secular tradition. All share a love of Japan's diverse landscape: the hills covered with pine and forests and thickets of bamboo, the open sea dotting with islands, surf rolling up onto the sand. It is a spectacular setting. One basic type is the tea garden, or roji. Like the dry garden, this has spiritual elements. This one depicted was visited by my master gardener colleague, Celia, in the city of Kanuzawa. It's called Kenrokun Garden. Roji gardens were developed toward the end of the 15th century. They consist of paths and resting places that surround a tea house or hut like the one shown on the right. Walking slowly through the garden purifies the guest and prepares them spiritually for the tea ceremony. This preparation includes cleansing of hands and mouth at a small basin, progressing slowly along paths and waiting. Some say the garden acts as the host. I was attracted to the idea of a tea garden, but I don't have space for a tea house, and I don't even like matcha tea. The second type of garden in the Sono tradition is Su Bani Wa garden or courtyard garden. These are tiny gardens enclosed within merchant townhouses from early Edo around the mid-17th century onward. They represent a condensed version of a tea garden. Most are private and closed to the public. They're very stylized with lantern and basin and a very few plants. I was attracted to this too, but my garden space is not walled in, and I do have a bit more room, though perhaps not this much room. The third type of Sono gardens are called stroll or pond gardens. These came about in the Heian period 795 to 1185, when aristocrats began copying imperial gardens. These were for boating, fishing, and socializing. This garden in central Tokyo is 144 acres. It has 20,000 trees, including 1,500 cherry, as well as Himalayan cedars, tulip, cypress, and plane. Initially, a feudal lord's residence was there in the late 17th century, and the first garden was built in 1772. After the Meiji Restoration in 1878, that's when the imperial family resumed power, it became the Shinjuku Imperial Botanical Garden. This set view is from the Taiwan Pavilion towards shaped pines and expanses of lawn, representing empty space, or the Ma. The pavilion was donated by Japanese residents of Taiwan in 1927 to commemorate the start of enlightenment in a peace era. Fittingly, it was the only part to survive the bombings of World War II. The rest of the park was rebuilt and opened as a public park in 1949. In my garden, I wanted to combine the smaller scale of the courtyard garden with some of the features of the stroll or pond garden. This is a small iteration of a pond garden in Hagi on the west coast of Japan. It's built beside a samurai-style house and uses water from a nearby river via canals. I wanted to adapt the ideas of this garden into my own small backyard plot, which is 8 feet across and about 12 feet deep. If this is a miniaturization of nature, mine would be a micro-miniaturization. As a starting point, I considered the basic building blocks of a Japanese garden combined in such a way to create harmony and beauty. In the dry garden, we saw the rocks. There's also the fences and walls, which are a backdrop and to contain the garden. Often they are bamboo fences or the oiled clay walls, as we've seen. Bridges come in many shapes. Gates are the formal entrance into the garden. A small hill adds depth and height. Plants should be limited in number and repeated across the space. Pathway should meander in a strolling garden. The stone lanterns are typical in shrines and temples. Water is central to all Chinese and Japanese gardens. It can be as simple as a basin or bird bath, a small pond, or a little fountain. I had already added a few of these basic elements to our modified Japanese-style garden. This pathway is made from planks recovered from the floor of our demolished garage. Reusing old materials was in keeping with the wabi-sabi ideal. This walkway bridges a downward slope into the main garden. It allows people to stroll along the garden, close to the plants and other features. I imagined it as imitating a Japanese bridge. This wooden structure, the Zelkova Bridge, uses the materials of my bridge/walkway. Bridges are often used to connect islands in lake gardens. There are many types. Wooden zigzags, slabs of stone or logs that can be arched or flat. The arched wooden bridge with vermilion-colored railings is well known in the Chinese tradition. We'd also built a gate, but not like this one. Torii gates are usually mark the sacred boundaries of a Shinto shrine. They're quite simple, a horizontal beam and a lintel supported on two pillars. Fushima shrine's gates are known worldwide because there are thousands of them leading up the side of a steep hill. In case you're wondering, the orange paint is to deter insects. I considered this shape for the entrance to my garden, but I needed a gate I could close and lock. Gates can simply be a marker. A lantern or small shrine serve that purpose. And there are many types. Circular moon gates symbolize heaven's affection and provide curves which are mirrored in the plants. I particularly like the simplicity of this gate into a residential garden. Note the roof and the closing doors. It resembles ours, which Stuart designed and built. It fits with the metal materials and color scheme of our house. It is lattice with small roof overhead, albeit metal, not wood. You can see through it, but it locks and is secure for a downtown property. Most Japanese gardens also add contours to the land by including a mound or a knoll. This produces a gently undulating landscape and allows you to build up plantings, perhaps mask something or add height, like this man-made knoll. This garden was built in 853. The knoll allows for contrast and textures between low ground cover and the prune shrubs or trees. It may convey the impression of a wooded hillside and create a feeling of distance. My garden is small, and so is my knoll. It's located roughly in the middle of the backyard. It's under the weeping crabapple, so it's mostly shaded. This made it ideal for Japanese forest grass. I love how these grasses flow. On the right front is all gold. Beside it is the variegated, which is a bit more hardy to zone 4. In behind is Hosta guacamole, the 2002 Hosta of the Year from the American Hosta growers. Its white flowers are highly fragrant. The chartreuse gold leaves have irregular dark green margins. Hosta aren't that common in the Japanese gardens I saw, but I love their shape and stamina. I find them restful to the eyes, and tranquility is definitely part of the Japanese garden philosophy. In front of the knoll, with its Japanese forest grass, is a dragon head bamboo. Bamboo is a notorious spreader, but this is a clumping variety that stays green all winter. It's very slow growing in our climate, though I have split it twice since planting in 2012. There are 3 key plants in a Japanese garden. I have the bamboo, which symbolizes resilience and growth. I don't have hydrangea because Stuart has a deep dislike of it. And the third plant is cherry or sakura. I don't have sakura, but the backyard came with this weeping crab red jade, which we protected during construction with lengths of old fences. It was likely about 15 years old. I decided it would work in lieu of a cherry. My crab's blossoms have never failed to impress me. I should probably hold a festival in their honor, as the Japanese hold their cherry festival to mark the arrival of spring, a time of optimism, renewal, and new life. The idea behind hunami, or flower viewing, is the Japanese custom of enjoying the transient beauty of flowers. Cherry blossoms, like my apple blossoms, are fleeting. In Buddhism, they're a reminder of the impermanence of beauty and life. In Shinto, it is said that Sakura holds sacred spirits or forces. As the saying goes, the best laid plans. Early on, I found myself deviating from my planned Japanese garden. After gardening in shade for 19 years in Hintonburg, I was thrilled to have a sunny bed, and I longed to grow grasses. This midsection garden, about 8 by 10, is bordered by the lattice fence and the curved bridge and walkway. The Zen garden to the left and the berm with the Japanese forest grasses to the right. The tree in the foreground is Japanese silk lilac. But instead of continuing with my Japanese theme in this plot, I planted a monoculture of Shenandoah switchgrass with its promise of red tips. I was born in Red Deer, Alberta, and this was my homage to the prairies. But I was soon thwarted. Even though the yard faces southeast, it's mostly shaded by neighboring trees. My grasses never got enough sun to thrive, and as a neighbor's Manitoba maple grew taller and taller, the site grew shadier. The grasses in the back were starting to languish. I was challenged by wabi-sabi, the acceptance of transience and imperfection, but I couldn't accept this imperfection. I'm a gardener, so I had to fix it. During COVID in 2021, I finally decided it was time to expand my Japanese-inspired garden into this space. In this new garden, I paid particular attention to these 4 concepts, which apply to all Japanese gardens. Borrowed landscape, or shakir, allows the garden to extend beyond its borders to include what is beyond a neighbor's trees or a distant hill, for example. Maigurkur is the practice of partially obscuring some garden elements from view to create a sense of tension, forcing the viewer to move around the space and explore it. Ma, as we've discussed, permeates almost every aspect of Japanese culture, including ikebana, home decor, and gardening. In addition to being purposeful arrangement of rocks with gravel empty space, ma can also be a gap between 2 branches, a lawn, or expanses of moss. I find it helpful to think of ma as punctuation in a sentence. Without that comma, for example, you can lose nuance or entire meaning. Ma provides that dramatic pause. Balance entails carefully considering the placement of each element. It's not about symmetry, it's about spacing. Items should be placed in odd numbers, seeking a complete and natural look. Using the tenet of less and more with fewer components, each one means more and has more weight and impact. Once I decided to resume building my Japanese-themed garden, I went back to the source for inspiration. I looked at stroll gardens like this huge one in Tokyo. The aristocracy began building stroll gardens around 8th century when Buddhism came from China and Korea. With Buddhism came calligraphy, ink painting, ikebana, and landscape gardening. None of those early stroll gardens survive today. What remains are those that were built around the 15th century. They're secular spaces, niwa, for entertainment, enjoyment, and aesthetics. They're often found at mansions and villas and include a pond, pavilion, bridges, all the key elements. The dry garden is intended to be viewed from a single place, but the essence of the stroll garden is moving around to specific viewing points. This stroll garden in Tokyo was built in 1654 as a leisure palace for a shogun. It's 62 acres, built in swampland off Tokyo Bay on the Pacific Ocean. The pond is filled with seawater. After the restoration, when imperial rule resumed again, it became a detached palace of the imperial family and was donated to the city in 1945, very damaged after World War II, but restored and reopened within a year. It's now surrounded by the cityscape and is a refuge for residents with its bridges, tea house, and long strolling paths. Pond gardens in Kyoto are typically smaller. Kyoto was the capital of Japan from 793 to the 17th century and is still considered its cultural center. There are 16 UNESCO sites there, more than any city in the world. There are also 1,600 temples and 400 shrines. We looked at the dry gardens of the Silver Pavilion earlier. That site also contains this circuit-style garden with a central pond, many superb rock groupings, and gorgeous views from the meandering path. Tenryaji, one of Kyoto's most famous gardens, is known for its borrowed landscape, or shakur, of the adjacent mountains, which give the garden depth. From the main hall, one can sit and meditate while viewing the central pond surrounded by rocks and pine trees. The fall colors are lovely, I was a bit early in the season, so you can just see a hint of color in the maple across the pond. And beside it is an arrangement of large standing rocks representing, Dragon Gate Falls. The Sogan Pond Garden was laid out in the 14th century by Zen master and garden designer Muso Sosi Ki. The pond remains the same to this day. Kinkajuji, or Golden Pavilion, also makes use of shakur, or borrowed landscape. This was originally a shogun's villa built in 1397, and yes, gold leaf was used. Later, it became a Zen temple. The pond is called Kiyakoko Pond, or Mirror Pond. Design was inspired by Chinese Taoist traditions. The islands were places for immortal beings. The rocks evoke mythological mountains. Some are also in shapes of turtles that support the islands, others like cranes, which transport immortal beings. Both are auspicious animals and symbols of long life. The islands are usually planted with pines, a symbol of longevity. They are pruned in traditional Japanese technique called niwaki. The branches seem like sails unfolded in the wind. My brain bursting with ideas, I had a look at my schematic plan. I already had borrowed landscape, the maples and cedars in the backyard neighbors' yards. I had my bridge, boardwalk. I had my viewing platform from the patio stairs leading to the Zen garden. Now for the new bed, 8 by 10. Hardscaping came first. I wanted to include a path, a bench, and water. I considered the path first as it would guide the placement of everything else. I wanted simple flagstones or raised rocks like these. This was the former home of a silent film star. This path draws people into the garden, visually and physically. There are many different types of paths: linear, zigzag, slab, and small stone. This sort of path is often found in tea gardens. Flat stepping stones preserve ground plantings, as well as orient the viewer to a specific visual experience. To stay on the path, the walker has to look down to the stones and walk slowly. They then come to a clearing and wider stones where they can pause, look up, and see the specific garden view. This was the effect I was looking for. I decided to extend my existing stepping stone path that went from the bridge or boardwalk to under the crab. Though I didn't want stones with sharp edges like these, I wanted a more natural look. I also made a second bench like this one to create an echo in the garden. It's made of a thick supporting beam from an airplane hangar that a friend had helped to dismantle. Another example of wabi-sabi, reused materials, natural and warm. Water is mandatory, whether running or still. It often represents the larger sea, lake, pond, or river in nature. Its bank is usually bordered by stones. I had a small bird bath, but I wanted more. I considered something simple, like this basin at the entrance to a house near the Golden Pavilion. But I wanted water that flowed, perhaps one I could grow plants in. I even toyed with depicting water symbolically, like this one at Okoji Sanso Garden. This scene is one of my favorites from Japan. It's trump-dol of a dry bed stream tumbling down the mountains, narrow to wide, beautifully set with plantings. But I already had my adjacent Zen garden, and I know this sort of effect is not easy to achieve. I had tried before in Hindenburg. This pond was at the Kyoto Imperial Palace. It's beautiful and relatively contained, but even it was too big. I settled for a 3-foot wide round pond, though it should be an irregular shape. It's also concrete, but Stuart maneuvered it in. We also placed the bench and began the flagstone path, which would meander from the old bench under the crabapple, past the new bench to the dry garden. Hardscaping well underway, I turned to plant selection. Japanese design trends toward a limited number of plants with an emphasis on foliage rather than flowers. I knew I would struggle to contain myself. Plants are chosen according to aesthetic principles to hide undesirable sights or be a backdrop to certain features or create a picturesque scene like a landscape painting. Garden trees are chosen carefully and arranged for their foliage and often their autumn colors. They are pruned to provide attractive scenes. Mosses are often used to suggest that a garden is ancient. Certainly, I sought rocks with moss. Flowers chosen according to season of flowering. Some have spiritual symbolism, like the lotus, which is sacred in Buddhist teaching. This was my shopping list in 2021. I had bamboo, Japanese forest grass, and my crabapple. I wanted some sort of conifer, Japanese maple, some flowers. I also wanted contrast, light to dark, fine and bold textures. The Japanese maple was the key plant. Crimson Queen turns bright red in fall and is cascading. At maturity, it is 10 by 8 feet, but so far it's slow growing, and I prune it regularly. Evergreen plants are the bones of the garden in Japan. They represent longevity. This white pine is 600 years old. 200 is common. Pines, which survive harsh climates and cold, are symbols of human resilience. This white pine was originally a bonsai in the ground, then trained into a boat shape. The head of the ship is headed westward toward Buddha's land of bliss. Miwaki, or pruning techniques, are extremely important. Branches are often pruned into a triangular shape. A shrub or tree's sinuous outlines give rhythm and movement to the Japanese garden. Every plant is chosen for its shape, but pruning is vital. One gardener told me that every needle is touched at least once a year. Last year's needles are stripped away by hand. There's always a lot of maintenance work going on in the fall. Yews and camellias are trimmed to domes. Ilex, azalea, and dwarf yew are often pruned into hedges. Bamboo's lower branches are removed to emphasize their height. The most striking shapes in a Japanese garden are the clipped pines and yews, which look like giant bonsai. Much as I love conifers, my garden doesn't have sufficient sun. I had already had to replace my thuja, which died in 2018. I put in a dwarf Japanese Acer palmetta Sharp's pygmy. Its reddish-orange leaves in spring return in fall. The small, rounded globe shape can be bonsaied. It grows only 3 to 6 inches a year to a maximum of 4 feet. On the sunniest edge of the new miniature pond garden, I thought a low-spreading small juniper might work. It doesn't seem very happy with the amount of sunlight, but it hasn't died yet. This is a few months after planting. You can see the juniper in the front center. There's also yew in the left corner for winter interest, and a variegated aralia on the other side of the bench adds a bit of light in the shade. Japanese anemone and bugbane are both in bloom, and the Japanese bloodgrass offers a shot of color and contrasting foliage shape. A year after the initial planting, Stuart built this bamboo fountain that I had designed. It was exactly what I wanted, but the raccoons loved it too. We repaired it several times. We put in a motion detector sound device that was supposed to scare the raccoons away, but it didn't work. I had to give up on the bamboo fountain idea. Our efforts were often thwarted by local wildlife. In addition to a family of 5 raccoons, we have Pepe Le Pew here, about 20 squirrels, a rabbit, and a groundhog, plus a herd of cats. Japanese garden fauna usually consists of koi. We have a veritable menagerie to accommodate. We later placed stones around the edge of the pond to make it more natural, in keeping with Japanese philosophy. Rhodo was part of the Northern Lights series, so I figured it would be hardy. Unfortunately, the squirrels took a liking to it and dug it up until it finally died. I replaced it with the blue lobelia you can see on the right of your screen. It's not Japanese, but I try to cultivate natives, and it was a nice height to obscure the back part of the garden in keeping with the maigukure, or partial obscuring. My bamboo fountain was replaced by a simple gurgle type, which I hope to improve on. I've been considering something such as this stone basin or tsukibai. They've been used in Japanese gardening since 959. The Shinto and Buddhist beliefs hold that one must wash your hands and rinse the mouth before entering a shrine. The same applies to tea gardens. Japanese bloodgrass didn't do well either. The squirrels kept digging it up. I added Japanese forest grass as an echo to the grass on the knoll. The juniper's still not doing well, but it's hanging in there, and the Japanese anemone partially obscures what is behind. My grandkids love the path and climbing the crabapple. Like any garden, mine will never be finished. Plants die or languish. Continual maintenance is a task and a joy. Elements also need to be considered. I want to add a stone lantern, but haven't found a distinctive one yet. I've learned so much on this journey. A few things you might glean from this talk. You might consider the idea of wabi-sabi, the beauty of the imperfect, impermanent, incomplete. You should feel free to adapt the Japanese traditions to fit our climate and your unique backyard. You might consider the concept of ma, that all-important empty space. You might also embrace the idea of mystery. One cannot fully define or understand the Japanese garden. There is something poetically magical about this. And related to all of this is your imagination. Every participant in the garden brings their own interpretation of what it means. A garden is nothing without a dialogue with the viewer. Water's gentle sound, flowers' stillness enfolds summer's quiet thought. There's still more to do, but I do enjoy this view from my patio steps. I sit in wonder at nature's splendor. It isn't perfect, but it's beautiful and peaceful. Thank you so much for your attention, and thanks to fellow master gardeners who helped me with this speech, Adair, Celia, and Dale in particular.